He says wait for how long? You've had a child before the child stops. Well, technically, they'll just say wait for the exactly. And also, exactly. Please check. Yeah, you gotta wait for a while.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar this morning. Unfortunately, our chairperson is having some connectivity problems, so I think let us just proceed. I would like to introduce our two speakers this morning. First of all, to present would be Mr. Rafdeen, sorry, Mr. Arafdeen. Thank you, Rasim, if you can continue. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Is everybody able to hear me for now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Okay, fine. And I'm going to share the screen now. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so the topic I'm going to speak about is the value of learnerships to employers and how the disability sector can engage with employers. So before I start, I think it's very important to place that the topic of the title in context. We are not talking about the disability sector and learnerships per se. We are talking about what is the value of learnerships to employers and how the disability sector can engage with employers. So what are the needs of employers and how can the disability organizations engage with the employers to meet their mandates? So mandates, in meeting mandates, one would look at aspects such as the empowerment of persons with disabilities, creating jobs for persons with disabilities, training persons with disabilities. But I think a very important aspect is providing the resources to be able to do that. So there is an option here that I'm going to highlight, and that is how disability organizations can actually raise money through the relationship of learnerships with employers. So I'm firstly going to talk about disability skills, give some background as to disability skills. We're then going to look at disability processes pertinent to learnerships and skills development. I'm going to do a little bit on BBBEE, then go into breaking down what disability learnerships are, and then I'm going to end off with what the financial benefits are to the organization itself. So my first point is going to be just giving some background in terms of where we are with regard to disability skills. So education, there's a huge educational gap. Persons with disabilities have not really had the opportunity to advance in their schooling, maybe the way that could have been the case. So that has led to a big gap. Learners have been absorbed at special schools, but very often special schools are challenged with regard to taking learners up the NQF level from grade 9 up to grade 10 to 12. And very often, in the case of School of Skills, they're not really aligned to an NQF level, and that also creates a bit of a challenge. With the TVETs, similar type of situation. If you go to a TVET and you ask them how many learners with disabilities do you have, very often that percentage is very, very low. And how can these learners be absorbed into?
Sorry, I've muted everybody. Rasim, sorry, just unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me again?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Right, so I was talking about the TVETs, and I was saying how the disability percentage on TVETs is very, very low. And how can we address the absorption of persons with disabilities into the world of work if the TVETs and the universities have such low numbers? And I'm talking about less than 1% in many, many cases. So let's talk about what those numbers should be in the form of disability employment equity. At present, according to the latest Commission of the Employment Equity, they've put out a number of 1.1%. It should be 7.5% if you follow the guidelines as per the Employment Equity Act. So one can see we're only roughly a sixth of the way or a seventh of the way in terms of where we should be, and we're not there. Even though government has tried to do a lot, it has not been very effective. The new amendments in the Employment Equity Act will address that to a certain extent, but I doubt very much whether it is going to have a major impact. So, but I think the speaker later, Dr. Karina, will basically highlight a little bit more around those practices. In terms of disability skills targets, the Skills Development Act speaks about 4%. The CETAs to aim at 4%. The educational institutions aims at 4%. So how can we redress the shortage or the missing of disability targets if we're not able to ramp up the disability skills side of things? For example, if you're going to get to 7.5%, and keeping in mind in the business busy with the census at the moment, I'm sure the census is not going to give us 7.5%. I think it's going to give us closer to 15% because that's the percentage of the World Health Organization and International Labour Organization. It is challenging. So how are companies going to be able to achieve anything more than 7.5% where we're at 1.1%? In the CETAs, there are trends, strong trends, in terms of moving closer to disability. And one of the things that used to happen in the past is that the CETAs couldn't attract disability projects from their stakeholders, from the levy-paying stakeholders. And in many cases, they sat with a pool of money, not achieving their targets, and then they offered those as special projects, which were taken up by organizations within the disability sector. There's a now strong trend where employers are realizing the benefits that disability presents, and therefore they're engaging in these numbers. So there's a good thing about it and there's a bad thing about it. The good thing about it is there's uptake from employers. The bad thing about it is that the amount of money available for the disability sector is going to be challenged. So let me just move on to the next point. Give me a second. Okay, so disability processes, and I'm starting at this point here because it's very important to understand how disability processes link in with disability skills. The first process that I need to identify is recruitment. Very often, organizations or companies that's looking for persons with disabilities would say, we would like to have a person with a disability that has an NQ4 and has matric, and they must have a mild disability because they need to be able to manage within the workplace. That used to be typically what organizations used to ask for. They still do so today, but I think people have realized what the skills gap is, and you find more opportunities at the NQ3, NQ2, and NQ3 level. But be that as it may, it is quite an onerous process. Let me give you an example of how onerous it could be. So an organization, a training provider, a employer will invite people with disabilities to apply, right? The people will then apply. They're then told, well, can you come in for the pre-assessment? When the people are successful at the pre-assessment, they will then say, well, you need to have, you've given us your proof of disability, but you please now need to go back to your doctor and have the proof of disability completed on our form. This is a practice that is happening more and more. And these are all impediments that we have in terms of getting learners with disabilities or candidates with disabilities recruited. And this is where I believe the disability sector can play a big role. Because very often, if I'm a person with a disability, I'm in a wheelchair, now I go for a learnership, they tell me all of this, I'm completely lost. I already struggled in this pre-assessment process. And now they're telling me that my proof of disability is not going to work. I need to go to my day hospital or my local doctor in order to get the forms filled out again. It's very stressful. So this is where the disability organization can actually liaise with these recruitment training providers in order to overcome something like that. The reasonable accommodation, people don't really understand reasonable accommodation, right? So like I mentioned earlier, people tend to want to take people with disabilities that got all their faculties in place, specifically in terms of, you're not too disabled. And when it comes to physical disabilities, that of course they can see, but the very sad part of it is that they may not see it necessarily with the unseen disabilities, like for example, psychosocial disabilities. And therefore, the reasonable accommodation doesn't even get thought of. And when they then have problems in the workplace, they can't manage it. They can't manage somebody that has bipolar. They don't understand the regime of medication. And that is why I once again want to emphasize, and I'm going to do it throughout my presentation today, why disability organizations are critical in this process. Then learner support. Unfortunately, on learnership programs, they will recruit the people and they'll train the people, but they don't really take into account the support of the learner through the entire process. Now, the learner support goes through everything that the learner needs to do in their journey. They need support within the training provider, within the training setup. There's a lot of innovation at the moment with regard to a lot of online learning, and a lot of online learning platforms adapt very, very nicely in terms of being able to support the learner within the classroom setup. But what about the workplace? I mean, very often you can remotely assist the person by giving them a call, sending them a message, using peer-to-peer type of methodology in terms of assisting the learner. That helps. Unfortunately, it's not really done. But a disability practitioner, whether it is in the form of an occupational therapist, a social worker, those type of disciplines, sometimes their skill set is needed to overcome some of the bumps that certain people are experiencing. So let me just move on. So the next subject that I'm going to touch on is understanding BBBEE. These are the elements of the scorecard. And this is not meant to give you an overview of what BBBEE is, but to emphasize how the disability organization can address the needs, and I must use the word pain points. The pain points of companies with regard to BBBEE. In ownership, now this is the most complicated one, okay? But and most people will say, disability doesn't play a role in ownership, but they do. And we just leave you with the following statement. if a company takes on a Black disabled female, and they place them and give them shares of 10%, they immediately meet the threshold requirement for ownership. So a lot of people haven't realized this, which also shows that there's a huge opportunity for disability organizations to engage with companies and form some kind of vehicle for ownership. But as I said earlier, it's very, very complicated. The management one, there's a one sub-element in the management pillar of BBBEE, and that is when it comes to Black disability employment equity. So in a case like that, if you have your staff component, at least 2% of the staff component are persons with disabilities, then of course you can claim the points, and it's 2 points to be claimed. It's very important that when you speak to a company, and you can tell them these type of things, and then you walk the journey with them. Right now, this is not necessarily learnerships per se, but you can say to a company, why don't you need 2 people with disabilities, right? 2 Black people with disabilities, and it's not gender dependent. Let us help you recruit these people, but let's do it via learnership. So the outcome is employment. And that is a need for a company. They need to be able to meet this minimum in order for them to earn points. And at the moment, companies are maximizing the points. They're looking for innovative ways to be able to take the whole situation further. And of course, disability employment equity is an easy way to do it. Then on the skills development side, there are 2 major fundamentals here with skills development. The one is they need to spend a certain amount of money. So in order to score, I think it's 6 points, they need to be able to spend about 0.3% of their skill spend. They need to be able to spend it on learnerships. Another important point is that they have to have so many persons in learnerships. And of course, this transpires to disability as well. So here you have a percentage of 4%. If they spend 4% of their spend on persons with disabilities, they get a maximum of 4 points. So these 2 categories, management, 2 points with disability employment equity, Black employment equity, and skills development for Black disability skill spend are 2 categories, and it makes up 6 points, meaning 6% of the scorecard. This is a huge negotiating factor and something that companies are very interested in. Then enterprise and supply development, this is not something that is engaged on with employers, except that we have protective workshops within our industries. And these protective workshops are actually enterprises. So how can the enterprise interact with the employer in order to gain benefits? This is not learnerships. It's more a matter of a company needing to have hangers cleaned, or they need packaging to be done, or that type of thing. But it can once again be related to learnerships, where you can say to a company, why don't you place some of our beneficiaries on learnerships that is actually cleaning the hangers for you? And let's just throw in another little dynamic there. We're going to form these learners into a cooperative, so that can be an ongoing business that the disability organization supports in order to offer services to the enterprise. That's something they can do. Then another area, also not related to learnerships directly, is socioeconomic development. A company's got to spend 5% of the net profit before tax in order to get 1% of the net profit before tax in order to qualify for 5 bonus points. Now, a lot of companies, they throw that money away. They look for a cause. Normally it's a staff member that's got a cause about they want to help animals, or they want to help cancer victims, or whatever the cause may be. And then they give the money away. What I would say to a company, why don't you invest in our disability organization, and we then going to put together a work readiness program. And that then will allow our learner candidates to bridge the divide in terms of entering into skills development. So that's just another mechanism that can be used in order to do that. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next topic, and my next topic is going to be the learnership side of things. So yeah, I need to go a little bit slower because this is going to do with money. And it's very important to understand the monetary needs of companies when it comes to disability learnerships. First of all, the companies do not go and apply for discretionary grant funding from CETAs generally. There's a low uptake when it comes to companies applying for CETA grant funding. And the reason why that is low uptake, because it's very, very complicated to make applications to CETAs. Now, some disability organizations have been able to do this, and they've been doing it very successfully. I, for example, work with an organization called Epilepsy South Africa here in the Western Cape. And Wendy Neff, she's the director there. They've done 1,000 learnerships already. So they have gotten it right. Another organization, DWDE, the same. Organizations like Cape Mental Health, I'm aware of them doing it as well. So there are organizations that have gotten this process correct. The challenge, though, is managing it is not that simple. And when I unpack what the fundraising aspects of learnerships are, I'll go a little bit more into the pitfalls. So yes, companies can make the applications to CETAs. So it's important to be able to understand the company's need for that, because you can go to the employer, to a company, and say, why don't we assist you in terms of providing you with the candidates with disabilities before you make that application. So let's say they need to have 20 people that they need to put through a CETA discretionary grant process. Suggest to them, why don't we do 5 learners with disabilities? We will basically do all the legwork for you, and in terms of your application. And by the way, Mr. Employer, the CETA that you're going to apply for may have a disability grant, which means that all our services would be covered for that particular side of things. And yes, they would definitely be very interested. So what are those benefits that the company, the employer, has when they engage in learnerships? Some of this is disability-specific tax allowances, and I'll explain that, but these are general SARS benefits. The first benefit is the employee tax incentive. For every disabled learner that they have on their program, they will get 1,000 Rand per learner per month. So the total benefit, because learnerships are essentially 12 months long, the benefit is about 12,000 Rand. That's a lot of money. So companies, in order to qualify for this, the learner must not have turned 30 in the year of the learnership. So very often in advertisements for learnerships, you'll notice they say 28 years old or younger. That is the reason why they use that 28 years old or younger, because it's an employee tax incentive. The CETAs, though, they're happy with the youth learnerships. So their criteria is 35 or younger. But when it comes to the employee tax incentives and employers, they focus on 28 years or younger. So that's a very big incentive. Then you got the tax allowance. Sorry, it's not section 18A. Section 18A has got to do with section 12A. So when you do tax allowance, a company can get 120,000 Rand as a tax allowance. That's a huge allowance on the net profit before tax. Now you compare that to a non-disabled person, the benefit there is 80,000. So you can see that the disability benefit of a tax allowance is 50% higher than what it is for a non-disabled person. And this is one of the reasons why disability learnerships are extremely lucrative. One, because of the tax allowance, and two, as I described earlier, is that a company can get up to 6 points on their scorecard by working with disabled learners. Then, of course, you get a tax deduction, and that just means that anything that you spend by way of generating your profits is tax deductible. So very often the stipend that the company pays, the training fees, the fees that they'll pay you as a disability organization, all that is tax deductible. Now, A lot of people don't understand the benefits of a tax deduction. If I were to go and I am Disability Incorporated, and I go to a PTY Limited and say to them, all my costs are tax deductible, and this is the overall picture, that benefit I can give you. Let me give you an example. So I can assist, as a disability organization, I can assist the company in getting the discretionary grant from the SETA. The SETA will pay the company 70,000 Rand. They'll get a 12,000 Rand employee tax allowance. That takes me up to 82,000 Rand. The tax allowances cash value of that 120,000 is 33,000 Rand. So now I'm going up to nearly 120,000. And the tax deduction on 100,000 spent, as an example, is about 28,000 Rand. I'm already on nearly 150,000 Rand as a benefit. So the benefit to the company is 150,000 Rand, but it costs the company 100,000. So now the benefit, the financial benefit for companies is so huge. And that is why they like learnerships for the disabled. So that it's paid for. But another thing I must also just mention, which I should have mentioned earlier, companies have been under the impression that this is an aggro spend, right? It's not something that they want to do. But if you put it across like this, that, and I know this is a bad term to use, but just to demonstrate the point, you are deriving cash benefit out of disabled learners. It makes a difference to the bottom line in your company by engaging disabled learners. That is demonstrating to the company the value that disability can contribute to their bottom line. And it is real. It's not about, oh, hazy fuzzy feeling, engage with learners with disabilities because it's good to do. It's your social responsibility. Yes, it is, but disability makes money. That is what is important there. So let me put this into the perspective of a disability organization, right? And what are the benefits for the disability organization in terms of calling it learnership fundraising? I know that may sound a little bit corny and a little bit old-fashioned, but essentially the disability sector thrives off funding. Okay, and we call it fundraising, right? It's the raising of funds that is imperative in terms of how a disability organization can raise money. So a financial model, and this is very, very simplistic. In a training fee, and I base my numbers just in case there are some people in the audience that understand how these grants work. I'm going to give you my model is based on services SETA. I did quite a lot of learnerships with services SETA. So the numbers is kind of fresh in my mind, although a lot of people will say to me, when last did services SETA put out a funding window, and that was like 3-4 years ago. I'm going to use that. So typically the services SETA will pay 20,000 Rand as a training fee. So the disability organization goes to a training provider and says, give me a price better than 20,000 Rand. Typically, 18,000 Rand is kind of a good fee to negotiate. Some go lower, some go higher, and you don't really make any money on it. Now, I must also make a distinction here. This is fundraising for organizations that are applying for learnership funding directly to a SETA. I'm going to do the financial model again as to how you can support companies that come to you and ask you to offer them a turnkey solution. So you make 2,000 Rand on the training fee, just very simplistically. On a disability entity grant, services SETA pays 6,000 Rand to the entity to run the disability project. So that takes you up to 8,000 Rand. And because you are the lead employer as a disability organization, you can claim the employee tax incentive. That is 12,000 Rand. So if you add all those three numbers together, 2,000 Rand for the training fee, 6,000 Rand for the disability entity grant, and 12,000 Rand for the employee tax incentive, you can earn 20,000 Rand per learner. So you go to a SETA, you apply for funding, you get 10 learners, you have made 200,000 Rand of funding that you've raised in order to run the project. So what do you need to do to get that done? And this is where the process is important. So first of all, you need to be able to build a strategy. what exactly are you going to do as a disability organization in terms of learnerships? So let's say, and this is one thing that disability organizations or any NPO per se, you can apply to every single seater, whereas a company can only apply to the seater they pay their levies to. So you build a strategy and you say, okay, fine, you want to focus on services seater, you want to do food dev seater, you want to do MERS seater, for whatever the reason may be. Right? Depends on your circumstance. So you build a strategy, you then make your applications to the seaters. Okay, they will then give you an allocation. Then these are the important components in terms of delivery. One, recruitment, and I discussed that earlier. Then, of course, you've got to do the training. Just a point on the training, 30% of the year needs to be spent with training. And that takes the form of classroom activity. There's a little bit of homework that they've got to do as well. Sometimes that homework needs to be done in the workplace. But essentially 30% of the 12-month period is dedicated towards training. Learner support, which I also explained quite in detail earlier on. But I want to spend the last minute or two of my presentation talking about project administration. This is a bugbear that actually makes disability projects or any learnership projects, it's a bugbear of these projects in that the administration is extremely onerous. Okay, the paperwork and the processes can actually delay projects. And when you delay projects, the seaters don't pay the grants, they don't pay the stipends of the learners don't go get paid, the learners toy. You inevitably have drop-offs and a lot of reputational damage. So very, very important that you understand the project administration part of it. And then, of course, project management. And this is where it is nearly as bad as project administration, but disability organizations are attuned to project management. Everything you do is project management. Your funder may be DSD, maybe Lotto, maybe wherever you go to, disability organizations have a very, very good understanding of project management. So yes, it is high risk, but it's not as high risk as you would have typically when you're dealing with learnerships per se. So that takes me to the end of my presentation. I'm just going to make this my screen a little bit smaller, so just give me a second, so that if there are any questions, then you guys can kind of see what it is that I covered. Okay, so over to the SAIDA representative.
Thank you so much. This is absolutely so informative, and we are really learning a lot today. Very complicated, I must say. This is we need to unpack this in a follow-up webinar, I think, even more. But thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Would you like to have the questions now, or should we keep them over until after the next presentation?
I'm happy to entertain some questions now, but I'm sure there will be questions relevant to the second presentation as well. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, let us open the floor for a couple of minutes to take some questions.
Okay.
If anybody's got some questions, please just unmute yourself and ask your question.
Well, people, yeah.
I see a hand raised. Ukuwela.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity. Thanks, Rustam. It's been very informative, and you are really an absolute specialist in your field. So I am based at a school for learners with special needs, and it's not really a question as much as it is a comment, and in support of your statement that education was one of your first points. And certainly, I mean, schools are not aligned with NQF levels, which makes it so hard for our learners to access these learnerships. Because at the school, we follow the DCAPS curriculum, which receives very little attention in terms of, I mean, it's been piloted and then.
Okay, we just lost your sound.
Are we all going to NQF levels? And I think the problem lies with education, but it's a two-way system. The problem also lies with well, with I don't know if it's which training with the training authorities and the NQF levels, particularly for our learners with intellectual disabilities, who do not follow a mainstream curriculum and who do not learn in the sort of conventional ways by writing tests and things like that, where we are definitely more practical based. I think that's my comment. Yes.
Just a reply, a reply to that comment. If you look at the readiness of learners to enter into a corporate environment, specifically out of your type of situation, they don't stand a chance, okay? They are extremely disadvantaged. However, I'm busy speaking to the Western Cape Department of Economic and Department of Economic Development and Tourism. So this is specifically Western Cape based. But they are now prepared to look at creating a pool of learners whereby we can look at work readiness programs. And I must just do a shout out here to Kwasa. They've got a very, very good work readiness program. But basically to start learners at the entry level. Now, it's not being on a learnership that is critical. What is critical is getting them ready for the world of work. And then secondly, is to give them the fundamentals of entry. Now, there are ways in order for a learner that comes out of your typical setup that doesn't have an NQF level, that they can actually go through an RPL process in order for them to get onto this NQF 1 learnership. Some seaters have kind of joined the fray and have allowed that. So they look at the pre-assessment results rather than at their educational background. And if I can use myself as an example, I got a postgrad in disability studies. I do not have a degree, I only have a matric. But I was able to do that RPL, missed 3 years, essentially, of my academic career to get from an NQF 4 essentially to an NQF 8. What's wrong with getting somebody that is maybe done a lot of the fundamentals and getting them at least onto NQF 1? So there are a lot of type of programs. This is the type of programs that the disability sector needs to take ownership of. So I'm glad you mentioned that point. Okay, we got another hand, Marius.
Okay, there we go. Hi, it's Marius Erasmus. I'm from Alternate Voice School, and I'm glad Ukuvela, I think it's Suzanne speaking on the other side. We've got a program, a similar program like that at the moment with McDonald's, where our children do job shadowing. They do it for a year, and the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, and Western Cape. In Western Cape, we've been doing it for 2 years. So is this a typical program that you speak about? And maybe we must try and take that forward. I must have a discussion with you, because we, as I said, at the moment, the Job Abled is doing the recruitment for McDonald's countrywide. We've got the contract to do that. And the way we do it is with these job shadowing. They job shadow for a year and then they get appointed.
So Marius, you already have a plan of action. And I'm really looking forward to hearing you speak. I think it's on Monday with the Western Cape Network. Okay. Yes. You're doing a presentation there. Now that is so important, because you coming from a situation of experience. It's experiential knowledge that you're coming with and examples thereof. And that is why I'm saying the disability sector needs to come together, and we need to do this type of thing. So the Western Cape Network is kind of a provincial forum effect, which is very similar to what SADA is doing. And I'm hoping that from SADA's point of view, that this type of conversations can happen as well. And I really want to emphasize, it is about, first of all, doing it because of the right reasons, the benefication of our beneficiaries and whatever you want to put it from that point of view. But really, it can also be a commercial venture. It can actually be something that raises funds for much needed activity. Okay, we got Michelle van Sale. She's had her hand up. I'm sorry I missed your hand earlier, Michelle.
No problem. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad that I actually got onto this. My occupational therapist was sick and she sent me the link and I joined at the last minute. So I'm Kuruma School for Autism. We're in Krugersdorp, Gauteng. And we also do DCAPs. And I love the curriculum. So our learners are learners with autism. So there's added challenges, but we've had a lot of success now with our vocational training. It's very labor intensive, and our occupational therapists have gone out into the community to find businesses that are prepared to take our grade 5, year 3. So it's the 18-year-olds. So first we do a year at school where they work all over the school to see what they like. Now we're placing them out only on a Friday. So they go out on a Friday and they're working. So we've got partnerships so far with PNA. SPA was wonderful. They let us train their staff. We always first try and get in there to train the staff, because working with someone on the spectrum has its own challenges. And as you say, they're not work ready when they leave school. So this is wonderful. It's part of the curriculum. And we sort of think that we'll be able to place some of those learners there after a year. I'm very interested in what you've said, everything about the tax benefits. And so we're looking into that because we want to really strengthen our argument when we go to the businesses and say, besides a stunning child, here is the benefit that you'll be getting from employing this youngster. But our big problem at the moment is also getting into, a lot of parents do want their children to do more study, and DCAPs, we were promised that they would be able to go to TVET from that, and it's just not happening. And one of the main problems because of that is because it's not actually recognized, the DCAPs qualifications. Our grade 5 18-year-olds who complete level 3, year 3, get a school certificate still, which is what I've been in special needs education for 30 years. We fought against this. This is why the DCAPs was developed. All we want is a GDE logo or DBE logo on a certificate for these kids. I cannot understand how it's so difficult. The gentleman who was working with it in Gauteng seemed to be a bit ahead there. The gentleman who was working with it and said that he would make sure at least...
I even cry. You know, when I remember her face, the way she was excited Monday. Then we're even making a joke.
I'm sorry. So he passed away, unfortunately, during COVID. So we back to where we
went to.
We need people like we need other outside. The Disability Alliance would be wonderful to approach the MEs and say to them, please just give these children something that is on paper for employers to see, so that we can go to the employers and say they have completed DCAPs grade 5, and we do good skills. You choose your subjects, and our skills are really these learners are employable, but we don't have the recognition from the education department.
Can I give you a quick strategy as to how to quickly overcome your challenge?
Yes.
You best know which industries your learners are conducive to. You mentioned SPA. I just picked up, you mentioned SPA.
Yes, yeah,
right?
SPA,
That your learners go to SPA. Now, SPA happens to be in the wholesale and retail sector. Yes. What I would do is I'd have a conversation with the wholesale and retail sector, and I'd say to them, this is my situation. Yeah. We would like to let our learners at least get an NQF1. Now WNR, we call it WNR Theatre, wholesale and retail. Yes. They have a very good NQF1 entry-level qualification. Okay. It's not relevant necessarily to the world of work, but it is on a building block. So what I would do is speak to WNR and say to them, wouldn't you please give us the funding to put through our graduates, and maybe I'm assuming you are 10 graduates, okay, it could be different, using it as an example. Yeah. Give us funding for those 10 graduates. So out of the 10 graduates, you're going to make the money that I described earlier. So it's a fundraiser, right? Then you go to SPA, and you say to SPA, would you be prepared to have our learners get exposure within your environment? 1-2 days a week, not hectic. Right? So they're going to agree to it. You know, you got the relationship already. Now, when it comes to the CETA's entry criteria, you need to be able to have a grade 9, that's automatically entry criteria. However, if you work with a training provider whose pre-assessments can show that they can get into that NQ1 qualification, you sorted. Because now you take them from 0, sorry, I'm putting it like this, you take them from 0 to hero.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
effectively, maybe you're taking them from grade 5. I think that's what you mentioned earlier.
Yes,
You're
it's a
taking them from
DCAPS
grade
grade
5
5.
and you're
Yeah.
taking them all the way to NQF1. And
Okay.
that's instant.
Yes.
So by all means, please link up with me. I'd love to change in a
Please,
project like
please,
that.
please, please. Where do I get your contact details, please?
I'm sure that Saida will, when they put out the presentation, then I'll make sure that my contact details is in the presentation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, then there's Ansela.
Hi, good
Sorry
morning,
if
everybody.
I didn't pronounce your name properly.
You did pronounce it correct. Thank you. So sorry, everybody. I was only able to join now about 2 minutes ago. I had another meeting. So I didn't catch the whole start of the conversation, but I just got the bit about, not having a school leaving certificate. And I wanted to know, because this is exactly the challenge that we have, our kids with Down syndrome don't even have a school leaving certificate because we can actually count the number of children that have completed matric that has Down syndrome. So they don't even get to complete high school. Employment opportunities for them is very, very, very limited. And like you said, choose the sector that you feel that they would be able to work in. And we have identified certain sectors like the hospitality industries. And you mentioned the spa. We have some spas that have been open, but we still are not really successful in getting our kids placed. We've even developed a supported employment manual now, which we launched last year, in the hope that we will get more employers open. So if I could really also touch base with you, maybe just at a later stage to get more interventions which we could implement in our organization.
We're getting to the end of my time, but let me say something extremely controversial. You said that you can't get your learners with disabilities employed. Now, there's a trend out there of something that they call serial learnerships. Serial learnerships is defined as a learner that goes from one learnership to another learnership to another learnership into another learnership. Now, the reason why serial learnerships happens is because people do not want to employ in South Africa, right? They are averse to it. I suggest you should embrace that. Embrace the fact that employers don't want to employ. For this very simple reason. If learners go through different levels of learnership, because once a learner's in a learnership, they're always going to be in a learnership, right? There's just not enough learners to cover all the opportunities that's available. That means that this person gets an experience every single year that's different. So to give you an example, they may start in operations at WNR Theatre, then they go on to commercial cleaning at Services Theatre. Then they do food packaging with Food Bev Theatre, and so they go on in a haphazard way. But there's a couple of important things that's happening. One, no one can take away their learning, right? The body of learning and what they are learning about is happening. Number two, this person's going to need support. So take a guess what happens. Who can support them? The disability sector. That means it's an income generator. So I know it's controversial because we want to train people for jobs. But in the current South African context, we are the world record holders for the highest level of unemployment and inequality in the world. You're not going to get it right. I mean, let's be honest about it. So to try and get employment for learners or for persons with disabilities, not going to happen. So take advantage of the government process for you to earn 20,000 Rand per person per year. Why not? If I use the previous speaker's example, where you told me about, we used the example of 10 school leavers. You can earn income for the 10 school leavers for last year, 10 school leavers for the previous year, and 10 school leavers for the year before that. You can make a good income. It could be a very good fundraiser for the organization. So I must emphasize, it is controversial, but I think there's merit in it. One last thing that I also want to just say, because I'm sure I'm at the end of my time now, is that in the way that I said you could earn 20,000 Rand per learner as an income going to a seater. I know of companies, and I'm talking about corporate training providers that provide services to corporates, right? They will charge a corporate, which is inclusive of training, anything from as little as 35,000 rand to as much as 60,000 rand per person with a disability that they do. Why can't that 60,000 be earned by the disability organization? Because you guys got the skill set, and you've got the human capital to be able to deliver these things. Now, this is something there's a bit of pivot that you're going to be doing, okay? I know it's scary, it's new, it's different, but you got it. You got what it takes in order for you to stand there and from a commercial point of view and say to a company, this is what we can do. You need us. We don't need you. We don't need your money, okay? I know that's being very whatever, but you need us more than we need you. That's how we got to go as a collective. Now, I must say, because the one thing that I didn't say, I'm a professional cripple in a wheelchair, right? I didn't get a chance to introduce myself. So I'm a wheelchair user with cerebral palsy. And then a person with cerebral palsy, it's obvious that we have a physical disability, right? But very often it's forgotten that we also have an intellectual disability. So yeah, I am sitting with a physical disability and an intellectual disability. We need to be able to take the strengths that we have, because I've strengthened myself in my other faculties. Okay, we need to, as a collective within the disability sector, be able to stand up with a voice, which of course SADA is, they're exactly that voice, and we need to engage with business. You guys are engaging with government, but business. So what I do here in the Western Cape is that I sit on the oldest business chamber, I think, in the world, or the second oldest in the world, called the Cape Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I drive disability there. It's taken me 4 years, I'm in my 5th year, to drive disability. And the Cape Chamber does a disability summit every year. It's one of their premium events of the year. So we have gotten a business chamber to take us seriously. Now imagine we were to do this everywhere. If there's an organization that is on this call from Erkuleni, please contact me, because I've managed to break through to the Erkuleni Europolis Chamber of Commerce and Industry. They're very keen on engaging with disability, but we need more of these relationships. Okay, so please, if there's anybody that wants to take this particular championing further, let's talk to business, let us get that. And then we can do the talk on the top, but it's the delivery at the bottom. It is that Elson School, I think it was, that spoke earlier, that has that relationship with Star. The other gentleman that had the relationship with McDonald's. These are the platforms where you have to work on it. This is chipping away at the problem bit by bit. But collectively, we'll be a powerhouse. Okay, do I hand over back to Saida?
Thank you so much. Wow, this has been a lot of very valuable information. And thank you so much, Rustim. We are really going to keep in contact with you, and I'm going to share your details again with everybody. I'm sure you will be able to help a lot of people. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, sorry, I was a bit naughty. I realized that I could put it in the chat. So anybody that wants my email address and my cell phone number is there for immediate connection. But I will send you my, in fact, you got my details already, eh?
I've got your details. Yes, I do.
Perfect.
I do. Yes.
Let me just take this opportunity to thank you for allowing me to present today.
Thank you so much. That is that should say thank you so much, and we are looking forward to continue this conversation in future. Thank you so much.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Dr. Karina. What else? She's got a terrible, difficult surname. Dr. Fisher Morganson to continue with her presentation today. Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Melanie, and a big thank you also to Rustim for very, and I can see everybody has really benefited from this, and I think we really need to understand the technical part of the learnerships. With I know, I mean, also from previous, that when Rustim and I have had our engagements, that he's on top of this, so he is really the best person to present on the technical side of learnership and how it really does help opening doors to employers, as we can say, looking at how are the benefits to the employers if the disability sector are able to present that to employers. So thank you very much for that, Rustam. I have also learned a lot. And thank you to Sarah and Melanie for inviting me on board. My name is Karina Fischer-Mogensen. I know it's a tricky one, and maybe as you can hear from my accent, I am also not South African, but I've been in Cape Town for 12 years now. So I might get there one day and be acknowledged as a real South African. Let's see. I'm not leaving anytime soon, but I think it was really great to have Rustam go first in today's webinar, because he's setting the scene and looking at the learnerships. And I will kind of then look at the next part, if I can say that, and build on what Rustam has been saying. What I'm really gonna look at is a research that I did with the disability studies at the UCT, and I was focusing on the disability employment support services, and it's essentially what Rustam was talking about around the learner support in the classroom and at the workplace. And then how are we actually transitioning from a learnership or any employment preparation program into actual employment. I can also hear that from the questioning and the inputs coming after Rustam and the engagement there. I mean, that is also part of what we are battling with as the disability sector. So this is where I'm going to focus my presentation on, which definitely have links. I will try not to overlap with what Rustam has been saying. There might be a few instances, but my interest really came out of when I see the importance of work. Because I mean, this quote I have put up on the screen now, it's about work. It does provide an income, but in addition to that, work can pave the way for broader social and economic advancement, strengthening individuals, their families, and their communities. But such progress hinges on work that is decent. So I think that's also an important part. It is about creating an income, which is very important, but it also has to be a living wage when we are talking about formal employment. And especially for people with disabilities, that's not always the case, that people don't think that we need to pay equal salaries or equal wages. And it's about the social connections that is happening at a workplace when you are engaging with other people. It's about having a purpose and choice, and that cuts across people with and without disabilities. So I think that is really where I am coming from with this this research. And just to get some of the technicalities out of the way, my research was a qualitative case study. That means that I work with a disability organization in the Western Cape province that are doing these employment support services for people with disabilities, and a big part of that program is the learnerships. That's what built around it, and as Rustam was saying, then providing that additional learner support for the learners with disabilities in the workplace and in the classroom. So I work with the disability NGO. I work with the learners with disabilities, and that was across different kinds of disability. As such, I didn't go into their impairments and their diagnosis. We know that there are differences between the different types of disabilities, but that was not really the focus, because I do think that there are definitely aspects that cuts across any disabilities. And then, of course, we have specific needs and capabilities of the people with different kinds of disabilities in that sense. And then we work with training providers that were providing the CETA curriculum. And then we work with the host employers that will hope
I think Dr. Fisher has got some connectivity problems there. Can you hear me?
You are working in this area already, but maybe we don't have a lot of documentation on this, and that is one of the things that the disability sector is needing. Sorry about that. My internet connection is a bit unstable, so I just went off there. I hope I'll continue where I kind of left off. I hope. Let me just start sharing the screen again. I hope you can all hear me again now. Good. Then I was focusing on these support services and how it actually facilitates the transition into employment. So we are having the learnerships and these support services, but are we actually facilitating the transition into employment? And I can hear some of you have already raised some of the challenges around that. Because, I mean, in South Africa, also, as Rustin was saying, we have actually great legislative framework. We have the Employment Equity Act, we have the Skills Development Act, where we have the learnerships fall under. We have the BBB Act and the scorecard, which is helping opening doors and to employers and with the employment of people with disabilities. So why is it that we are actually still struggling with getting people into employment? And I know there seems to be different numbers floating around about the exact number of how many people with disabilities are actually active in the labor force in South Africa. I have a number here that says 1.3% of the South African workforce is people with disabilities. It's around that number. Rustin, I think you also mentioned 1.2 is 0.8, but the matter of the fact is that we are not really doing that great in getting people into employment. And yes, we do know that general high employment rates are a fact in South Africa, so it's making it difficult for anybody to find work. But if we compare people with disabilities and without disabilities, people with disabilities are still not having the same access to employment as people without disabilities. And especially it goes for our youth with disabilities as well. So then if we are looking at that vehicle that the learnerships are, which is the government's, one of the prime vehicles for upskilling the South African labor force. We have here numbers from 2011 to 2017. And this is for both people with and without disabilities. So that's also one of the problems. We don't have a lot of data that is disaggregated, that specify who is disabled and who's not disabled when it comes to these learnerships. It's very difficult to find comprehensive quality data on this. But we can see in total over these 6-7 years, we had about 444,000 people registering for learnerships across all the sectors, across people with disabilities and without disabilities. And about 247,000 people of these that registered actually ended with a certification, a SACRA certification on the NQF level. So that's about 56% of the people that register that come out with a certificate. And this is, again, as I'm stressing, both for people with and without disabilities. So then it is, and I don't want to go into too much detail here because we talked about this already. Then there are the disability sector that is putting in place different kinds of support services. I think a lot of you organizations sitting here are providing some kind of learner support, as Rustin was also saying, which in one part focus on the people with disabilities and upskilling the life skills as well. And then also on the employer side, where we are doing disability sensitization, some are doing accessibility audits, and we're looking at policy. So in different ways, we're doing this learner support and the support services. So this was really the program that I was looking at that was providing such services around the learnerships. And some of you have already mentioned how difficult it can actually be for people with disabilities to get into these learnerships, because we know it is a highly marginalized group. These are two quotes from the training providers that was providing the curriculum in this program. And they were saying, we find there are huge gaps, because even though the learners sometimes have matric certificates, they're doing math at a much lower level. And some of the learners are from different backgrounds, and they haven't actually engaged that much in English as a first language, and all our training material is in English. It's making it difficult for the learners to keep up in the classroom. Another one of the training providers was saying there's a huge gap in the disability sector. We generally take on learners that sometimes they just left primary school, but it's the NGO which decides. They tell us that we really don't want to discriminate against anybody. They've already been discriminated against previously, and we want to give them an opportunity. So this is also where, if possible, that we can provide access to a marginalized group as people with disabilities, if we're looking at the levels of their education, and if we can make concessions around that. If we are looking at the age of people with disability, because we know sometimes they get delayed in their schooling because of their impairment, because of the educational system. But again, if we are looking at the CETA structure and how you're able to benefit, for example, from the tax rebate, that's where the problem come in, because the CETA structure is not allowing for these factors that are disadvantaging people with disabilities. So that's where we need to maybe engage the CETA structures and say, we need to look at why we are not getting people with disabilities into these learnerships. So that's also where we can see that the little data that we have, and this is again from the case study that I did. So this is one example, but maybe you can recognize some of it, where again, the training provider is saying that on the able-bodied side, we tend to have 80 to 90 completion rate in terms of finishing the program. On the disability side, 50 to 60% is a really good number, not competing, but finishing, actually staying on the program. So our retention rate on this program was 51, which is quite good for our standards. So in this particular program, 75 people with disabilities started the program. Out of that, 68 people completed the program. And out of the 75, 15 would pass the test at the end of the learnership and actually get a SAQA qualification. So that's 20% out of the initial starting learners that register for the program. We can discuss if that's good enough. That's a bigger discussion. And I think this is part of why we are struggling to make the transition from the learnership and into employment. But we can also say that, I mean, we have dropouts, and as Rustem was saying, we do have, the reality is that we do have serial learnerships, that learners with disabilities, people with disabilities jump from one learnership to another. And you can have kind of two views on that. From the disability organization, one person said, I can say commitment is a big thing. Some of them don't want to work, they want to be in another learnership. So down the line, they'll be here again, doing another assessment, be in another learnership. So that's really focusing on the learner themselves and saying they're not committed, they actually don't want to work. You could also turn it around and say it is actually a reflection of the desperation of people. And you can't blame the learner in the sense that it is the only opportunity available for them currently, which is also what Rustem was talking about, that what are the other opportunities? Can we actually go in and look at getting people into jobs, or is a better alternative to go into another learnership, because at least then they will not sit at home, if that is the alternative for many people with disabilities. So I think we need to keep these things in mind when we talk about how the learnerships are being used, both by employers, but also by learners, and how we sometimes tend to blame the learners because they jump from one learnership to another. Because you can also see from a quote here I have from Robert, which is not his real name, but his frustration came from that. I think by now somebody should be established. Look at my CV, for example. That's the educational background here, the employment history. We are going from forwards to backwards. So I did that learnership. Then I worked at the construction. This is actually a physical labor. And then I did the welding, where I worked at 2 welding companies. Then I did the assisting at the cafe, and then I did the bakery. So now the bakery and welding don't go together. That's quite different. It's an advantage and a disadvantage on my CV, because they see you have the experience on different things, but you're not really committed. But I did commit for a couple of years. That's Robert's story. And I think maybe a lot of you can recognize that they jump from one to the other, but what is the alternative again? Do they have a career development path for them, where they are actually getting career guidance and saying, this is your opportunities, this is the where you can access opportunities, or are they on their own jumping from one to the other because that's what they see immediately available to them? So that's also the problems with, for example, with Robert. He had done learnerships, but he's not getting into work. And if we are then looking at the employers that were hosting the learners, some of the learners had also quite not a great experience, if you can say that, at the learnership, because Pumesa was saying, they're not helping us. We're just sitting there doing nothing the whole day. They only told us to copy things, only that, nothing more. Sometimes we do answer the phones, but we do nothing with the computers. They're not helping us. So again, that talks back to what Rustem was saying, that sometimes we as a disability organization and sector, we're not able to help and support the learners at the workplace, but that is actually what we do, because sometimes the employers are hosting people with disabilities because they want the points, because they want the tax reduction, which is opening doors. But then what happens is that the learner sits somewhere the whole day, do not get the work experience that they really need to, again, for transitioning later on from the learnership. So there we have a responsibility with the engagement with the employers and say, this is not only for your tax reduction, this is not only for your tax benefit and your BBB points, this is also to ensure that the learners do actually get the experience that they need for the transition later on. So then you have other employers that had a very different experience and engaging much more with the learners. One employer was saying, that was hosting learners with disabilities, they were saying, what we learned is that every person is different. It's better to meet the person and understand the challenge before you can make a judgment. But you know, we did have preconceived notions. That is where the worry came from. I think with disability, we learned that even a disability is unique to a person. It just depends. Because we have learned now, every case is different. And this is what we need, because if we need to make changes at the workplace, employers need to understand disability. We as a disability sector need to engage employers and say, this is not just about placing this one learner or these 5 learners. We need to make changes in the workplace and change people's mindsets. And I know that within the CETA structure, there's not really that space to engage the employers in that way, but we need to find a way where we can actually engage employers on this level as well. Otherwise, we end up like Pumesa, who's just sitting in a corner and not really getting any experiences from her learnership. But what really came out very strongly from the learners with disabilities was the engagement and the personal development from the learnerships. So Leonard was saying, I would say more self-confidence, just being in a community with others that's like me, it gives me confidence to uplift myself. I was doing collages and poems with the learners that made them reflect on what actually came out of being part of this learnership. You can see there's a poster that talks about the power of positive affirmation. And Robert made a poem where he says, learners' ideas shared every day, physical disability, live, enjoy, no matter what the obstacle, assist choice with confidence, opportunity to feel like qualified professionals. So yes, we are talking about an NQF level learnership, and that they should come out with a certificate at the end of it. But the personal development that these learners go through is very, very strong. Then you can say, but how does that fit in the learnership structure, and how is this talking to the transition into actual formal employment after the learnerships or any other employment preparation program? Because when I was talking to the learners, I think Leonard captured it again quite nicely. When I asked him what is happening after the learnership, he says, that's the scary part, I don't know. And the learners that I had talked to, none of them really know where they were going. Some of them were in the process of signing up with another learnership. So there again, they're jumping to another learnership. If it is an upwards trajectory going to another higher level, in NQF level, then it kind of makes sense. But if it's just jumping from one to another, then we can discuss, is that the point of the learnership? On the other hand, is maybe it's better than sitting at home doing nothing. As Rustam was saying, they are getting the experiences, they are getting the connection, the social connection, and they are getting more of the self-confidence that is important to in this aspect. One of the things that is also making the transition into formal employment after a learnership is actually the CETA's administration. I have a quote here from a training provider that says, the problem is that people finished a business administration course in April and learners have been coming back and asking when are they going to get the certificates. So what happens is it's difficult for them to get a job because they'll go and be asked, okay, where's your certificate? But they don't have it. Frustration, and then they'll just join another learnership, and so it goes on and on. So there we can see I had examples of learners that had waited a year after they had actually passed the learnership and were qualified, but they waited up to a year to actually get the certificate. And as we heard from some of you already, employers, when you go out, they ask for proof of your skills level. And in a highly competitive work environment as South Africa, if you don't have proof of your technical skills level, they will just have the bigger reason to go and employ a person without a disability that might have the qualification. So within the CETA structures and the administration, we also have a problem, and that cuts across disabled and non-disabled learners, I would say here. So what is the other challenge when we are talking about coming from a learnership and actually transiting into a workplace, a formal workplace, is that there is missing an exit strategy. So from the disability NGO that was implementing this learnerships, they were saying the challenge is a proper exit strategy and a constant follow-up. Where is the learner going? Is the learner being employed? Another one was saying CETA must make provision for every learnership allocation. There must be a built-in fund so that everybody who runs learnership will be able to track the CETA learners. And that is actually when it comes down to it. We might have the numbers of how many people enter and finish a learnership, but then we don't know what happens to it. And as Rustam was saying also, I mean, the outcome of this should really be employment. But currently, we have no data, we have no evidence of if these CETA learnerships are actually getting people into employment. If that is the outcome focus of it, you can say there's lots of other benefits from being part of a learnership that has to do with the with the personal development, people are getting a stipend. And again, what is the alternative? But I think we should still keep a focus on these learnerships are actually supposed to get people into employment. So this is some of the things that I think we as a disability sector must engage, and not just maybe be passive recipients of the CETA learnership funding, but actually put pressure on the CETAs and saying, this is where we are coming short. We need maybe provision for the education level. Maybe the age limit is also a problem. And we need to be able to say, where are our learners going after they have ended this CETA learnership? So how can we do that as a disability sector? And I'm putting it out there to the Disability Alliance now, because we're not there yet. So that is one of the challenges, really, what is coming out of the learnerships. But what we did find as a summary, definitely from this study that we were doing, was that it provides access to opportunities for a highly marginalized group. We saw that a lot of time people with disabilities would not be able to go into formal skills development as the situation is now, but these learnership through the disability organization with the added learner support does provide access to opportunities. And it is a journey from misery to self-confidence and hope. The misery comes from the stories from the learners. For example, Leonard said, and in that time it was misery. That was when he was diagnosed with his disability. I was at home all the time and I thought my life was coming to an end. But from there, entering the learnership and the program at the disability organization, he came and found more self-confidence, he found hopes, and he started to dream for his future. And I think that is very important when we're talking about people with disabilities. Where we are still falling short is that the program is still struggling to close the hard skills gap for persons with disability with substantial work experience and accredited qualifications. And as the market is now, it is the NQF level. I know that, Michelle, you also, I mean, we have the DCAPs and that discussion, and maybe that is not recognized, but then we have to find a way how we can recognize because people's skills level, because employers look at the certificates and accredited qualification, especially in the job market that we are seeing today. What we did also see was that host employers that were hosting the learners with disability became disability confident between the personal connection between people. They had a good engagement with the learners with disability at the workplace. But what we did see was that this disability confidence, the personal among the colleagues, it did not translate into significant changes in the workplace around inclusivity. So what we are really also should look at, we need to change workplaces. We need to change the mindset, not only of one person. That is important, and that's maybe where we're starting, but now we really have to move beyond that and look at the workplace, the systemic structures, and look at how our workplace is becoming inclusive. So what actually did happen for many of the learners was that they graduate from the program with hopes and dreams, with self-confidence, but then they are really left to their own devices with limited capabilities to transition into formal employment because we don't have that exit strategy. We don't follow up in the CETA learnership structure. There's not that exit strategy, and how are we actually taking responsibility for people transitioning from learnerships into formal employment? And so what I'm saying is we need to, South Africa talk a lot about transformation. Initially, we talk about a lot around race. We talked about gender, but we really also need to talk about disability transformation, and we need to not only talk, but we need to actually action this. So what came out of this research is maybe not surprising to many of you, and I know a lot of you have these stories, but this was really to focus on documenting what are the challenges out there and providing an evidence base that we can go to the CETAs, to the employers, to the government and say, this is what is happening out there, and we have the evidence. And what we then developed from the findings was an integrated, inclusive employment approach. It speaks to the same as Rustin was saying. We need to develop relationships between the different stakeholders. We need to focus on upskilling our people with disabilities with accredited hard skills. But we also need to have an integrated support system. We know for many people with disabilities, parents and guardians play a big role. We need to look at how can we actively involve parents in this support area. We need job coaches or social workers, as Rustam also was pointing out. And we need to create that confidence and consciousness around people with disabilities so they can actually have agency of their own and take this confidence and go out and look for jobs themselves with support and career guidance from disability sectors or what other organization is available there. We definitely have to upskill the employers. They need to become disability conscious and confident in what they're doing and understanding disability. I think what Rustam has been talking into is also a business case for employment of people with disabilities, where you can say on the monetary value of these learnerships, that is opening doors, and it is a business case that many employers understand. But I think we cannot stop there. We need to also have employers on board on a more social justice level. We're not talking about charity, but we're talking about this is also what we need to do to uplift the South African society and make sure that everybody is included. And employers need to understand their role in the labor market and how people are being marginalized and oppressed in the labor market because of how workplaces and the economy is structured. So what I'm calling for across all of this is a radical disability transformation. So we're talking about transformation, but now we actually really have to change this. We have to look at systemic structures, not just making sure that we get 5 people with disabilities into this company and 5 into that. We need to have the structural changes that get employers on board on a broader level, that we are actually creating a labor market that are inclusive on all levels, definitely on disabilities, and there's lots of other marginalized groups that we need to ensure also have access to the labor market. The government has a big role to play in that. We might have a great legislative framework. Is it being enforced? Is it being monitored? Do we know if these actually works? As I said, with the CETA learnerships, do we actually know if people with disabilities after a learnership are getting into employment? There are indications that some are, the indication that we still are struggling in that way. So we need to also have the monitoring, tracking, and evaluation structure in place so that we know what is working and what is not working. And I think a lot of the work that you are already doing in the disability sector, we were talking about the McDonald's and the experimental programs that you are doing. We need to document and know what is working and what is not working. And then we need to build on that, and we need to share in the disability sectors. I mean, the SADA is a good platform for sharing. And we need to pressurize the government, the CETAs, to say, it's all good and well, you're putting a lot of resources, but we need to actually have these things in place in order to support people with disabilities and make sure that they are also included in the labor market. So I think that was a long talk, and I hope that it was. I do realize that for what Rustem was very practical and very concrete. This aspect is coming more into a qualitative focus on what is happening in these learnerships, in the employment preparation programs, and what is happening around people with disabilities and their access and transition into the labor market. So I hope that that could also add to the conversation. And I will stop here and hand over to Melanie again if we are doing questions or how you want to do the further engagement. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, let us hear if there's any questions from the floor.
I see a hand, if that's a new hand from Ukuela.
Yes.
Thank you so much for a very informative and very, very valuable talk, and also for all your research. Just on the learner support, I couldn't agree more with you. Ukuela is a form of a supported employment program that we do at a school here in George. So as with our other schools, or with other schools, we also do work exposure during the final year of the students. But then when they leave school, we actually, we've got our entry criteria. And then for those candidates who qualify, we go and look for jobs, and we provide the learner support, because the employer is just so much more likely to employ someone if they know there's going to be support for them. It's not a drop-off service. If there's anything they need, you do the disability education, you assist for the learner to take the transport. The holistic support is so important, and we also raise our own funds so that we can support the learner for the first month with their transport, because how are you going to get to work if you haven't earned a salary yet? So yes, I can absolutely emphasize that learner support is so valuable. And just on entry criteria, this has got nothing to do with your academic ability or your ability to read or write. We really want learners who want to work, and I think you also said that not everyone wants to work, and it's quite obvious to see who wants to work, who's always attending school, who responds positively to feedback. Those are the main things that's going to make it work out there. And yes, we've learned hard lessons, which we can talk about all day, but really what I want to say is that where it has worked really well, to the extent that we've got a very good relationship with Woolworths. We can go back any day with a list of candidates. I went back to Safari Braai products this morning. They have offered me another 2 jobs because the other jobs worked out, and they feel they're not alone in this. And there is going to be support, and we are in constant feedback with each other, what works, what's not working. So I just want to encourage everyone, it is possible, and let's talk about what's working and what's not working, because ultimately for our learners, it really also is about economic empowerment for them, and that is the way out. And also what is critical is making a good match between your learner, their abilities, their skills, their interests, and the actual job. We try and avoid a situation as desperate as we are, because it's not easy to find jobs, but to avoid a situation where any job is good enough. It is not sustainable that way. It has to be a good match between those 3 factors. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your inputs, because as you're saying, I think it goes for anybody, disabled or not disabled. It has to be a good match, because you can get yourself to work even if you don't enjoy it, but is it sustainable, and what keeps you going? It needs to be a good match. And I really am encouraged to hear about your approach, about how you are supporting the learners actually in the first month or more, at the workplace, because that's that exit strategy or transition strategy that we actually need, because we can't just say, now you finish the learnership, go and get work. That's not going to work, because as from your experience, it's clearly show that just in terms of transport, how are they going to get there? And the employers also get anxious and say, now we're all on our own, we need to settle in. So it's very encouraging hearing your experience. And I really want to encourage you and any other organizations that are doing similar things, document it. It doesn't need to be a research at an academic university level, but let's just please document so we can learn what works and what doesn't work, because otherwise we're going to be stuck here and doing the same things. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yes, so we try and support the learners for the first 12 months of their employment, and then they're on sort of autopilot from there. But I think that is if you can commit for 12 months, and we find with COVID, some of our learners were retrenched or the companies closed down. But because they've been working and they know what it's about, they are so employable. I think work experience makes one so very employable.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you.
This is so great. This is also how we learn from each other. Organizations, you know, and yeah, this is wonderful information sharing. So is there any other questions? We still have got time. Okay, well, we have learned so much this morning. I would like to thank Mr. Arifin and Dr. Fisher-Morgensen for teaching us this morning. I'm sure you didn't only give us a valuable information, but also hope. Persons with disabilities really face tremendous challenges in terms of employment, and just to know that there are some tools available that we can use much more effectively. We should leverage all of these to create a win-win situation for both employer and employee. So thank you so much for answering our question. So, oh, sorry. I see another hand up, Rastim. Yes, before we close. Please continue.
Yeah.
Good day. Good day.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I just got some feedback here. Okay, so I think we've come up with some lovely ideas out of Karina's presentation with regard to how do we take things further. And I really want to implore that SAIDA actually develops a strategy of engagement with employer bodies and with the seaters out of today's conversation. I'm sure you got these bridges built at other levels, but specifically with regard to business chambers, let me rather put it that way, business, organized business, and as well as the seaters from that perspective. And also maybe a different approach with government. We speak to the DOH all the time, possibly even DEL as well, the Department of Employment and Labor. But the one cluster we don't engage with much is the economic cluster. So we're talking there about the Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Small Business, and the Department of Economic Development. Those are all institutions that I think we need to engage with, and I really believe that SAIDA is the perfect platform to get these type of engagements going.
I really agree with you, and I think we should continue this conversation, please. I also would like to engage the EXCO and the other members of SAIDA to take this further, and this is really important. Thank you so much for your guidance, and we are going to tap in that guidance much more in future, and I hope that you will be willing to work with us in this regard.
Hello.
I saw, yes, Z Mav.
Yes.
Please continue.
I'm Zinhle. I happened to get into the session. I'm a member of the board at the rehab in East London. Hello.
Thank you. Yes. Would you like to ask the question?
Yes. Actually, I wanted first to thank you for this information sharing session. I would like to ask, how do you get the documentation or the presentation after this session?
Could you please share your email address in the chat box?
Okay, please. Thank you very much. I'm delighted about this because the East London Rehab Center is actually assisting some of students that are with disability provided by CETA, but it just initiated that. I also have a double cap where I work for the department, but I became disabled. But there are serious challenges, especially with the government departments in order of employment of people with disability, because that 0.5% or 0.8 at what level? Because you find that at a senior level, management level and things like that, you don't have people with disability there. If there could be consideration of that as well to support more on empowerment, especially the government sectors.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Sintle Mababan.
Please share your details in the chat box.
Okay, thank you. I thank you very much. I was so excited to get through this program anyway, this session.
Thank you. Is there
Thank
anybody
you.
else that would like to comment or share questions? It looks like we're covered for now. Well, then let me wish everybody a wonderful day further and enjoyable weekend. Thank you so much for your attendance. Thank you.